It is the Marxists who are the most despicable now in relation to things like slavery in America in the past. They exploit such to further their own agenda. The BLM people don't care about the untold millions starving and overall badly suffering in Africa. The left leaning Brookings Institute did a study in 1998 proving that even at that time there had already been great progress for race relations and black success in America. The devil is a false accuser. Calling people racist who are not racist is a false accusation. It also negates the significance of actual racism. The left often won't acknowledge the obvious facts, like how whites fought to end slavery in America. The USA was a leader in ending slavery on a hemispheric scale, and blacks and Native Americans in America owned slaves. Critical race theory actually gives a worldview that is centered upon America and Europe, as if all of history has been this struggle to free blacks from bondage to whites. Modern white people did not invent racism. To the woke crowd, original sin is being born white. The people you hear calling for reparations for blacks have succeeded in America. Otherwise, they probably wouldn't have a public voice, which would cause you to hear their calls for reparations. The left's positions are illogical and indefensible. That is why they try to scream down and censor their opposition rather than reason logically with them. Those who cry about hate speech as if it's so incredibly traumatic give reason to believe that they have had very privileged lives. Woke ideology is a clever way to bully people. Woke people bully each other often. They want to think that no one is more awake than they are. In woke culture, diversity actually means conformity. If everyone who promotes woke cancel culture were thoroughly scrutinized by the standards of woke cancel culture, everyone would be canceled. When you enable anyone in an evil pursuit, eventually you will be called controlling anyways, if you so much as fail to express full support and compliance with everything that they do and hope to do. The social justice people want vengeance and or power, not equality. The pushing of CRT and gender ideology are bullying to extreme degrees. The term white fragility is an attempt to cover this bullying up and further bully anyone who pushes back at CRT ideas or any other form of racism against whites. America does indeed have systemic racism at this point against straight white people. Seeing everything through the lens of race, like CRT teaches, is the very definition of racism. Race ism. Think of the word. CRT literally teaches certain people that the world owes them a favor. That never ends well. Leftist professors rail against capitalism, and their salaries are paid through their university's endowment. Will they put their money where their mouth is and give up their capitalist generated salary, or at least give away their salary as much as it takes them beyond the median income? No. One of the last things that the left wants is to end racism. They couldn't exploit it for their own ends anymore then. Critical race theory is a Marxist power grab in how it necessitates a totalitarian state in order to be implemented. This totalitarian this totalitarian state is necessary to discriminate against white people, to supposedly remedy past and ongoing racial injustice. The Marxists then can call anyone a white supremacist who opposes their totalitarian CRT ideology, which requires a Marxist state for its implementation. Crafty. The CRT narrative is calculated to promote racial strife and tension using its false narrative. It is just a dumb excuse for Marxists to gain power over us. Influential Marxists in America today live well above the median income for U.S. citizens. Think about it. The CRT people can't explain the great wickedness in cultures where there have been no white people in power. Keeping religion totally out of politics means that politicians should be allowed to lie all the time. I think religion is out of politics then. Remove Christian influence altogether from politics, and you get Marxism or something close to that. Those who truly believe in freedom of religion don't want others sharing their religious beliefs because the government told them to comply with them. With the Marxist, it is totally the opposite. Nations and borders guard against universal corruption, universal dangers, and a universal dictator who is by nature of his position accountable to no one. Marxism is a system based upon pure absolute greed. The left should learn from the French Revolution. One concept which spawned that is the concept that man is supposedly inherently good and only needs to be freed from the chains of institutions. When the revolutionists came to power, though, they proved that institutions are inevitable and supposedly inherently good people will turn on each other and kill each other. What many call free love is actually a method of devaluing the individual and destroying the nuclear family. This makes people much more susceptible to the control of a totalitarian state. The power hungry want control. They need to destabilize society for this. Gay marriage and transgenderism becoming prevalent are immense destabilizers. The left is so adamant about teaching young children gender ideology because they know it won't work with older ones with more developed brains. Children are so impressionable that they will believe almost anything. It's small children, especially, proven by how they typically will believe in Santa Claus. The public schools and the media are conversion therapy. They want to ban conversion therapy from homosexual to straight, but the public schools and the media are conversion therapy from hetero to homo or trans or some other weird thing. The Satanists don't need their Satan clubs in public schools. Satanism is already taught in public schools, anyways, through gender ideology and a multitude of other things. Preserving society means preserving childhood innocence and attacking the things which attack childhood innocence and putting down those who perpetrate these things. Marxists are against childhood innocence. Young children cannot be trusted to make any decisions at all about just about anything. Why would allowing them to choose their gender be a good thing and not rather have destructive consequences? Many small children could even be convinced that they are a superhero. Parents do not let children choose their race. Yet race is not exact. So that would make more sense than choosing one's gender. You could convince many children that they are of a different race than the one which they apparently are. Does the left really believe its own ideology? Are leftists just as outraged when a transgender man hits a woman as they are when a cisgender man hits a woman? Let the leftists be left to each other about whether a transgender woman, I have that in quotes, becoming president would actually count as the first woman president. The left wants to censor books exposing the true nature and effects of things like homosexuality and transgenderism from the public altogether. Yet they cry fascism and cry about censorship when parents want X rated books promoting homosexuality and transgenderism banned from schools so they won't be seen by small children. The left is all for censorship, unless it is censorship of the perversion which they want promoted. The left overall preaches love and tolerance for everyone who says and does exactly what they tell them. Virtually everyone will accuse a youth pastor of being a pervert and a groomer if he taught at church the very same sexual things which are normally taught to children now at public schools. There is a sense in which all minors viewing pornography is rape. They cannot legally consent to participating in a sexual act. They are doing this as a third party by viewing pornography. Twitter or X still allows hardcore pornography. Elon Musk did not change this, and the mainstream media has no problem with him over this. Dr. John Money, the founder of Gender Revolution, also advocated pedophilia. And so did Harry Hay, the founder of the gay rights movement. He was literally a member of NAMBLA. When someone is advocating children's rights at the expense of parental rights, it is indeed wise to check their hard drive. The rights of parental discretion over their children are intended to protect children from such people. There is big money to be made in transitioning people from male to female or vice versa. There is zero money to be made in transition being deemed unnecessary. To the left in the present establishment, gender affirming care is castrating and mutilating children. There was one gender clinic in America in 2007, In 2021, there were about 300. Transgenderism is obviously almost 100% a planned social contagion, with the contributing factor that common chemicals like BPA and atrazine are likely feminizing males, especially developing ones. Yet anyone can see that the media will attack anyone who says this is a problem, and can sense that any scientist who were to present evidence of this would be labeled by the mainstream media as a quack. People who have transitioned their gender and then detransitioned are basically ignored and get virtually zero mainstream media coverage. Those who come out as trans, though, are celebrated by the mainstream media. The only state in which homosexuality was legal in 1967 was Illinois. Even the godless Sigmund Freud believed homosexuality is a psychological disorder. It was well known in 1967, and still, that homosexuals are disproportionately and exceedingly more likely to be involved in public lewdness. Not in the very distant past, Joe Biden was citing the Defense of Marriage Act to say the U.S. government would only protect marriage between one man and one woman. About a decade later, he signed the Respect for Marriage Act, which essentially says the opposite of the Defense of Marriage Act. Dementia is not his only problem. The LGBTs on the left are actually the ones who need to stop pushing their religion on people. The gays used to say it was nobody's business what they did in their bedrooms. Now there is a whole month dedicated to proclaiming and celebrating what they do in their bedrooms. It is no surprise at all that the LGBT parades are full of nudity and sensual dancing. Pride Month equals LGBT Extremist Month. America has one day to honor military veterans, another day to honor veterans who died in their service to America. And America now has a whole month to celebrate anyone who commits any unnatural sex act or anyone who identifies with those who do such. The ADL, which is supposed to be about protecting Jews, also protects LGBTQs and leftists to whatever extent they don't come against Israel. The far left was ignored and, if not praised and justified by the mainstream media, until the Israel topic came front and center. And then look who gets blacklisted, even though they did not get blacklisted for promoting riots, racism, and anarchy beforehand. Israel itself is one of the most LGBTQ friendly countries on earth. Modern Israel is even called Sodom and Gomorrah spiritually in the Bible in Revelation 11:8. Tel Aviv has been voted the number one gay city in the world by gay people. The media basically calls any criticism of a Jewish person pushing its narrative anti Semitic. Yet when a Jewish person, the Libs of TikTok lady, speaks or exposes things which oppose the media's narrative, then it's all of a sudden not anti Semitic to, to criticize her. Like some blacks, the Jews as a people thrive on perpetual victim status. It is often blameworthy to not blame Jews. Jews have perpetrated much evil. You have to not use your God given intellect and or you have to lie in order to not blame them on many occasions for many things. You can know who rules over you by considering who you're not allowed to criticize. If the mainstream media were honest, they'd tell you that their actual definition of an anti Semite is someone who is hated by the Jews. The media narrative is that Jews should be proud of their ethnic identity, yet other white people should be ashamed of theirs. The establishment will especially never call Jews racist for promoting Jewish interests and for only wanting to marry other Jews. The world condemned apartheid in South Africa, yet it turns a blind eye to basically the same thing in Israel. The LGBTQ stuff, as well as the leftist stuff overall, is being pushed from the top by the Jewish bankers who use the LGBTs and the left overall as their pawns. Those who seek to expose the criminal banking entity running the world and running America through the Federal Reserve System can't help but note that this entity is controlled by and filled with Jews. The international banking cartel, the mainstream media, the pharmaceutical mafia, and the entertainment industry are all evidently controlled by Jews. Stock in the Federal Reserve is inherited. It cannot be bought. and much of it is owned by foreigners. The US government owns zero stock in the Federal Reserve. Thomas Jefferson cited the 10th Amendment as evidence that the powers granted to the Federal Reserve are both unlawful and a Trojan horse for the bankers behind the Federal Reserve having unlimited power. Remember, the Federal Reserve had a charter in America from 1791 to 1811 before its reinstatement by the Federal Reserve Act of 1913. Here's a quote that is attributed to Thomas Jefferson. Some claim it's not from him, but if this quote did not come from him, it is still wise, and the bankers do not want you to hear it. If the American people ever allow private banks to control the issue of their currency, first by inflation, then by deflation, the banks and corporations that will grow up around them will deprive the people of all property until their children wake up homeless on the continent their fathers conquered. I believe that banking institutions are more dangerous to our liberties than standing armies. The issuing power should be taken from the banks and restored to the people to whom it properly belongs. The U.S. government was not in debt before the Federal Reserve Act of 1913. All money in the USA is printed by the Federal Reserve, loaned to the U.S. government, and paid back at a rate of 2.6% interest. This creates a never ending cycle of perpetual and increasing debt. As of November 2020, the collective assets of the Federal Reserve Banks was over $7.15 trillion, and that had almost doubled from March 2020 to November 2020. All the money printed for COVID relief, and we are supposed to believe this wasn't a planned crisis. The COVID lockdowns also did much to take away the middle class. An example is how tenants did not have to pay rent anymore. So many landlords had to sell the houses they owned cheaply to big real estate companies. The Federal Reserve is not subject to an audit from the actual federal government. Many would like to change that, but the Federal Reserve greatly opposes being audited, and it's no surprise that they have got their way to this point. The U.S. Congress does have the power to abolish by the stock of or otherwise alter the Federal Reserve System, yet it has never done so since the Federal Reserve Act of 1913. The Federal Reserve is unconstitutional. The Constitution gives Congress alone the power to coin money and regulate the value thereof. Why do almost none of our politicians ever contend with the Federal Reserve? Yet the federal government now picks on Texas for trying to enforce existing immigration laws. Well, it does nothing but encourage states and cities which blatantly violate federal law by providing sanctuary, I have that in quotes, for illegal immigrants. What is going on? America's politicians have seen to it that Israel has its wall, a great iron wall, and that wall was funded by America. Yet America doesn't get its own wall. Why doesn't Israel take in many of these refugees from Muslim countries? They are closer to the refugees' home countries too. Why doesn't the mainstream media promote and pressure towards open borders and diversity in Israel? And why don't we hear the media promoting Arab Lives Matter in Israel? The mainstream media promoted and defended the left no matter what they said or did until Israel came to the forefront again in late 2023. What does that tell you? Israel could have done many things to protect civilians in Gaza, which it did not do, including opening its own borders to temporarily shelter the civilians under close supervision. Would Israel actually have its own people pretend to be foreigners who murder and cause terror in order to draw America to help in its war? It is already known to have happened. The Lavon affair of 1954. The mainstream media isn't likely to remind you of it, but it is documented and there's no disputing that it happened. No nation has received more American aid than Israel. Israel is not America's ally. It is rather a parasite to America, which is weakening it and troubling it. It is a liability to America, to say the least. Obama took Trump's president immigration stance in 2006, when Obama also professed to be against gay marriage. The U.S. government almost forcing people to take the COVID vaccine is true fascism. Israel is even more pro abortion than the USA. It even loosened its abortion restrictions as a direct response to the U.S. Supreme Court striking down Roe v. Wade in 2022. The ADL denounced the overturning of Roe v. Wade and called abortion a Jewish value. The requirement to love your neighbor as yourself means protecting the unborn from those who would harm them. Planned Parenthood has made Hitler look like a saint with its massive amount of murders. Many who support abortion would be outraged to hear that someone killed a pet which they didn't want to take care of anymore. There is a universal difference between forcing or greatly pressuring someone to put an experimental vaccine in their body versus forcing someone to give birth to a child that is forming in their body as a result of their own choices, which is the case in over 99% of pregnancies. Accepting abortion rights is to assent to the serpent that man can be as God. Anyone who claims the pregnant woman's right over her body to justify her having an abortion must also, to be logical, say that a pregnant woman should be able to use drugs and alcohol at will during her pregnancy. Many of those who act outraged that a woman who has been impregnated through rape should be forced to have her baby would be outraged if the rapist himself was actually put to death, as he ought to be. The pro choice people sure don't mind giving Satan power over their bodies. The desired ends of any wicked scheme might be labeled as progress by those perpetrating the scheme. You have to wonder when progress to the progressives will mean killing off certain groups of people who have already been born for their genetics or their beliefs, n- not referring to the death penalty righteously being carried out on those worthy of death. Those who call themselves progressives are becoming progressively corrupt. Human surrogacy is a form of human trafficking. It has been called such by the EU and banned in many countries, but not in the USA. It is an open door for predators and eugenicists. TikTok has been a great source of corruption, yet the Zionists don't control it yet. That is why our politicians are coming against it. People don't get suspended from big tech platforms for hate speech against Christians. The big tech platforms have the power to make it seem like the vast majority believes something which most people do not believe, and vice versa. At the core of the environmental movement is a massive attempt at a mass power grab. Consuming pornography strengthens an industry which obviously fuels demand for prostitution. This obviously increases human trafficking. At the Freemasons' 300-year anniversary ceremony in England, they gloated on video about their symbol being on the American $1 bill. Yet some deny the symbolism on the $1 bill as stemming from Masonic influence. The media often lies by omission. The Jewish bankers, the Zionists, and the left operate based upon fear. They want people to fear what will happen if they speak against their corruption and the concepts they promote. People who have to scream and curse to defend their stance are losers, and they are usually wrong too. The truth will be called hate speech by those who hate the truth. Building 7 is a key to understanding that 9/11/01 was an inside job, along with the fact that laboratory grade dynamite was involved in the destruction of the Twin Towers. Multitudes of Democrats denied the 2016 election and called Trump an illegitimate president. Their hypocrisy in the names they call those who deny or question the official 2020 election results is great. Laws now are too unnecessarily complicated. You need to be a lawyer not only to understand them, but also to understand what the other lawyer is doing to try to circumvent justice. I believe that it was Satan who came up with the Not Today Satan shirts. They trivialize the danger Satan represents and the harm which he is capable of. If you had told someone that the USA would be what it is today in the year 2000, they probably would have thought you were joking or insane.